here in the library. It is February 13th, 2014, and I am here with...
Dick Galligan.
Okay. Dick, tell me something about your life that's not Brewster, just to sort of put you in context.
Fine. I was fortunate back in, I would say, 1950, when my uncle and aunt purchased the Joseph C. Lincoln house. And I remember coming down about a year before they bought it and entering the building. They actually put me through a window, and inside, because we didn't have the key with them and I could let them in, the staircase was not connected to the second floor. So I knew my uncle had a lot of work on his hand. So it took him, a good year to get that thing together with the help of another uncle, and I don't know who else helped him out, but it definitely wasn't livable.
So how old were you?
I was, I'm going to say 14.
So,
No, 13. No, I was 13.
okay.
Yeah.
So you
12
spent
or 13.
summers here in Brewster?
Yes, in other words, I want you to know that I wasn't fortunate enough to have a wealthy family that had a place to stay for the summer or even for the month. But I grew up in North Cambridge, which is a good working class neighborhood, and went through high school there. And I'm still in touch with a lot of kids that I started kindergarten with.
Some of whom live on the Cape now.
Yes, my mother worked at Harvard College in the dining halls, and she had no work in the summer. So my aunt said, why don't you come to Cape Cod, take care of her son, while her and her husband, well, she worked for Norm Cook, who was the head of Chamber of Commerce. She was his right-hand person. And they owned a place called the Chowder Bowl over on Old Wharf Road in Dennis. And they had a little cottage that was right near the water, and my uncle went there in April and never came home till October. So as soon as college was out, my mother we didn't have a car, my uncle or someone would drive us down here, and we arrived with baggage.
So you're 13 years old, you're going to spend the summer in Brewster on Cape Cod.
Yep, and the only one I really knew was Jimmy, and he was probably about 6 or 7 then, and his dog Chippy. And so I asked my aunt, and I don't sit around that well, and I said, how can I, what can I do to keep myself out of mischief? Well, fortunately in those days, the traffic was very, very, very light, and I can give you some examples of that. But I had brought a bike down, and I could take my bike, drive it all the way to East Brewster to Tad Ellis Road, okay? Turn up Tad Ellis Road to the old Brewster Golf Course. And I remember I had the names for my aunt. The two gentlemen that owned it was Russ Optebeck and Orrin Smith. And Orrin had a beautiful big gray dog that I fell in love with, and I wanted to caddy. And I did that when I was 13. In the summer I was 14. A little aside on the dog was, I can always remember if I got a chance to, you caddied for all the people that were vacationing and so forth. But if he was the golf pro, if he took me out, the dog would follow us. I thought that was the coolest thing in the world, that he'd go out. And then when we got to the 9th hole, it was an elevated tee. Whoever was playing with tee off, Taffy would go down the side into the pond and swim the pond over and get up and then follow us up the hill. I thought that was the coolest thing in town.
So this is a 9-hole course?
9-hole course then, yep. And I met a couple of guys from Orleans that were there, but we did that when I was 13 and 14. And they had a little, what they call a caddy shack, it was just a shelter, and we'd bring our lunch and we could eat down there. And mostly the other kids, some kids from Brewster, there were kids from Brewster that I ran into. I can't come up with the brothers' names right now, but that's what took care of it 2 summers.
So how much does a caddy earn at this time?
Oh, I can't remember that. It was so much around, I don't know, it was $2.75 or something like that.
Oh, that sounds like
and
good
then
money.
Hopefully, a lot of them would give you a tip.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what it worked. And then along about, depends how long we stayed there during the day, 5-ish, I'd get on the bike and work my way home.
Now, just to make this clear, where was the old Brewster Golf Course?
Well, where Tad Ellis Road is.
Yeah.
we just followed that straight in, and that went right to the clubhouse. In fact, it crossed the railroad track, if I remember right, and then you know, went up the hill. Of course, now it's been phased in with the, what?
Brewster Green,
Brewster
or
Green.
the villages?
No, yeah.
The villages.
Yeah, so that was a good setup. That kept me out of trouble for.
Well, it can't be all work and no play.
Oh, no. That's when I met Judy, but that's a little.
That's later on, okay.
My summer of when I was 15, I upscaled from the golf course, and I have to give her a lot of credit. I should tell. My mother always had to go to church on Sunday, and do you know how far the Immaculate Conception Church is? That's a good walk, especially when you start 2 houses down from here. And one of the ladies that she met there was Mrs. Mears, okay? And she would go this way, and 9 out of 10 times she'd pick us up. And that's how we got there, and that's how we got there. Otherwise, it's a long hump. And she offered me a job when I was 15. And I worked down at a place that was known in the other end of town called Betty's Curve. Have you heard of Betty's Curve?
Yeah.
I forget what the restaurant was there on the corner of, but
This is before the Nevins owned it.
Oh gosh, yes. I'm 15. I could ride my bike to that one. That was a lot easier than the golf course. And there they had like a variety store, if you would, and it was closer to the street. You know, now if you go down, Luke's is there, and you know,
yeah,
the donut shop, everything is set way back. They were right on the, you know, the curve went that way. And if you came out of the building, went left, you're on Lower Road, right next to the Nevinses, where that was right side by side. And next to us was a little coffee shop. I remember they had some cute girls working there. I got that wake up here. And my job was outside. He was a character, Mr. Mears. Outside there was an old Coca-Cola stand, and I used to keep the ice in the bottles, okay? And I'd sit on it most of the day and talk. But they had 2 gas pumps out front, and that was my job. You pull in for gas, I go out, you tell me what you want, I fill it, you pay inside. So I didn't have to handle any of the cash. And I had a little stand, and I would do your windows for you, and sometimes I'd get something, and sometimes. And I did that for the entire season, and that was a good take, and I get to know a lot of people from Lower Road and Paynes Creek, and as you may remember, my mother ended up living down in Paynes Creek when she retired. Yeah. So that took me another year. I can continue if you want. The following, about 5 years, I guess, 4 years anyways, I got a job at Ken's Market.
Now, just to put this in context, what is Ken's Market today?
What's the name of the little market? You go out of the Coogan's house, you walk by one other house, and it's right there. Okay. What do they call it? It's a...
Brewster Village.
Thank you, yes. Look at the building. You've got the building that goes this way, and it seems to be an extension on it, okay. Well, that extension was where the vegetables and fruits were sold. And it was like a 2-car garage. It had a garage door that you opened up in the morning when you went in. You opened it so that it was open to the public in the air, and people would come in and, get the redhead. I remember the stories when an old timer I worked with the redhead radishes and romance and the widow and the watermelon. He told me all those good stories. And
are you going to tell them to us?
Oh, I just did.
Oh, all right.
But it was very interesting. Of course, I only lived one house, 2 houses up, so I could get there at 8 in the morning. I go home for my lunch, and I think I get through work at at 5 o'clock. And I learned I think I can tell that here. I learned a tough lesson from Harry Alexander.
Tell us.
We all know Harry Alexander, who took care of the mills and for years and lived on Stony Brook Road, where what's her name lives now?
Peggy Farber.
Yeah, and he was a local character, and his son, his wife Jessie, and his son Kenneth. And he had a lot of good habits and some bad habits. And I know one day, once in a while, he would come in the morning around 9:30, 10 o'clock, and be in his bike. Hi, nice to see you, Mr. Alexander. Hi, son, and he'd go in the store. Well, the same day, he came back about 4:30 with his wife. And I said, "Hi, Mr. Alexander, nice to see you again." He let the wife go in the store, and he came over to me, and he says, "When I'm with the wife, never say again." Because she knew what he was buying first thing in the morning, because he was buying it again in the evening.
Of course, she never touched the stuff herself.
I don't know that. She had
Okay.
it clean. I can remember the guys telling me what, because he was in charge of the grist mill
Yeah.
and the whole thing. I remember the guys telling me the little gems they would find behind stones. Yeah, that went on for a couple of more summers. I finally graduated from high school, and no one in my neighborhood went off to college. I mean, it was a working class neighborhood. Well, one night Jack Murphy did it, but I took some schools. I took some courses at a prep school, and that came back down to the Cape. Went back home. Ended up going into. We joined the National Guard. Went into the service for 6 months. Came out. Came back down to the Cape. That type of thing. And then eventually I had to get a real job. And I got a job at W.R. Grace, and there was an old timer there to turn my life around.
Really?
Yeah, he was an old Frenchman. He knew I liked to play hockey, and so he used to call me 3-on-2. Hey, 3-on-2. Called me in his office one day, and he said, 3-on-2. I want you to go to college and be a chemical engineer. I said, Mr. Bork, I can't spell engineer. My fault. He said, you go to personnel. Tell them I sent you. They'll pay you your course. And that started me. And 6 years later, I finally graduated between nights and days. Yeah. But then, I had some very good memories of my summers on the Cape, which included the library.
Well, let's backtrack a little bit. Tell me something. What do you remember about the library in those days?
Well, the thing, I'll give you two things. The one I remember the most was when I was a sophomore. I came in to look at some books or something, and I want to say her name was Isabel Laporte.
Yes.
Sound close?
Yes,
Huh?
that's right.
Right, and she greeted me, hi, come on in here, and she brought me way down to the children's department. I was never that big, but I was a sophomore. And when I announced it, she said, oh, I'm sorry, come over here. I remember she was all apologies. And she put me in the right spot. And when I got a little older, let's say that we were 15, 16, and there were a little group of us, and I could give you some of them. Katie Gibbs, that lived in Lower Road. At the captain's place, Jackie Grenier on the Egg. Next door, there was a beautiful young girl who worked here summers named Judy Galligan. And then, it wasn't Judy Galligan.
I think it was Judy Wilson.
And, but the guy that I stayed really friendly with, that I was really close, was Sonny Sensabaugh, and he lived up at Locust Cottages.
Yeah.
Okay? And I can give you a couple of Sonny stories, but with the library, on Tuesdays several times, we would gather here. Oh, there was some gals up on 137, the Athertons, I remember they came. And we would have scavenger hunts on Tuesdays, early evening. And that was funny. We all go out and run around and try to find out what we found and again come back here. And it kind of gave the kids a place to gather.
Who set up these scavenger hunts?
It was connected with the, with the library then, yeah. So.
And it was all around the neighborhood. You had to run all around the neighborhood.
Yes, oh yeah, you run like crazy, At first, if I thought my mother had it, I'd shoot down that way, and we'd go to the Brewster Inn and get something from Fran or whatever, everybody down to the Gibbses. And Breakwater Beach is where we all gathered. It was a place, the kids meet, like Sonny Sensabaugh came down, there was, Phyllis Hunter, she lived, if you're looking at the Brewster Inn, she lived in a house on the right. And there were a couple of other summer kids that we all...
Now you're 16, or some of you are 16. Did people have cars?
No. I was for me, it was a little older. I think it was my 19th summer when I was working, and came down for this. Yeah, I think it was my last summer I worked for Ken. I had an old car that lasted the summer.
So you're middle-aged teenagers, but
Yes.
You're pretty much set in place here.
Yeah, and then I can remember there was such little traffic that Sonny Sensabaugh and I became very good friends. And I give a lot of credit to the Livingston's family at Livingston Pharmacy, because Sonny worked down there when I was working at Kent's. And they took good care of him. They helped him get into Mass College of Pharmacy. And he eventually became a pharmacist, had his own operation. He had a sister, Judy, who hung around with us, and he had his own operation up in New Hampshire. Unfortunately, he met his girl, his wife, working there as kids, and unfortunately, he died at a young age in New Hampshire. But Sonny and I thought nothing of thumbing to Orleans when we were 15, 16, to go to the movies. And the fun thing was, there was an early movie, and getting out, okay, we'd have to run down to get our thumbs on the road because there's not a lot of traffic. And once you lost that movie crowd, it was thin. And we've learned over the years that the cars with the bright lights were tourists from New York. The guys with the old cars with the dim lights, we got out even further. And we knew that they were locals. And God love Gordy Silva. He was an electrician, and Fran, I think that's what, they were dating then. So he would always pick, he'd drop Sonny at his house, and he'd drop me at Donald Doan's. We'd fly home from there.
Tell me about Donald Doan's.
Well, I got along really well, but my cousin Jim Coogan, as you know, who became an author, and he has an article in the Cape papers twice a month. And I don't know how many books he's got out now, him with his friend Sheehy. But when Jim was a kid, he got himself down there at, I would say, 9 years of age. He'd go in, and when you went in the store, then to the left was the rack where the magazines were, and then down below were the papers. And he'd sit in the corner, and Donald let him sit there, and he'd read and read and read until he'd get up and go home. And then the other, going that direction, how they think of it, was the coffee shop. The Brewster coffee shop was known as Mary and Andy's, okay? And the last name was Soames. I know they had two good-looking daughters, one my age and one a little younger. And they had a pinball machine, and they had a jukebox. So one day I was playing the pinball machine, and this little blonde came in, and I said, wow. So I'd get to date her this summer, and she was a gal named Judy Wilson from New York. I never realized in 10 years she proposed to me. but that's how that worked out. And
well, now, didn't she work at the Woodshed?
Well, before that, her sister Fran and Fran had the guest rooms in the restaurant going in the Woodshed. But Judy was like 14, 15. She was making beds, you know, cleaning and helping in the kitchen. So she did that 14, 15, 16. We were talking the other night, and she said, well, do you remember, I went down there one night, I was 17, so she was 16, and we just sat out on the porch in the rockers, and it was a Saturday night, and we, from 8:30 till 11, and I went home just a little before 11, we counted cars, all 9 of them.
Sounds like a hot date, Dick.
Yeah, well, yeah. It got better later on.
So that was dating in Brewster.
But then she ended up, you know, Judy didn't have, like us, she grew up, she was a baby at 10, you don't have 10 kids, you know, she grew up in Long Island. And she ended up going to Cortland State Teachers, so she was a little behind. And then once she turned 21, and Ron Thibodeau, my buddy, we were coming down weekends, and I walked into, I dated her one summer, we were kind of hot and heavy there, and then I hadn't seen her for about 3 years, and I walked into Woodshed, and I said, Ron, there's that gal that you used to go with. We got it made here this summer, you know. And the rest is history. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was a good take in it. And see, those days, the Woodshed was a sing-along bar. It wasn't, you know, all the kids hooting and hollering. You heard every college song, and then there was a piano bar, and they do the singing and singing. And I remember the guy that lived right across the street from here, in the man's Arden Molstead, he'd get up and he'd say, at least once if he was in it, here's to the Cape, the grand old Cape, the land of the sea and the pine, the only place for the human race, all the time. I can always remember that, don't ask me why. And then when Judy and Gail would sing it, her sister sing a song, my buddy Ron and I would kick the bottles over down below just to make noise. They were very nice.
Did you know any of the people in Brewster Park?
Yeah, I didn't have a good story on Brewster Park, but you know what I remember? I remember when I was 16, working all sorts of hours at Kent's Market, the kids from Brewster Park would always stop on their way home from the beach. And they'd get out of the cars and get their sodas and da-da-da-da-da and take off. And I said, well, I'm here like a turkey working every day. So I wasn't, you know.
Speaking of turkeys,
Yes.
do you want to tell me about Brogie's,
But which one?
the turkey farm?
I mean, what, the signs?
Well,
No, I know that Uncle David worked there once for yeah, what was it, yeah.
is it Broachy?
Yeah, Brogy, yeah. No, the only thing that came in recent years were my son-in-law, who's a builder, and I grew up, I pal around with his father, Paul Daly, and Paul Sullivan. They were builders in town, and they did a lot of work at the museum, I know.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, his son Brian married my daughter Amy, and he had a job over there for Mr. Brogy when Mr. Brogy retired, and they said, oh, it's got to be, I don't know, a 15 or 18-foot big quarterboard that says Brewster Turkey Farm. And he asked Brian, he said, my wife wants me to get rid of it, can you get it down and do something with it? He said, I got it, I'll take care of that. And we were up in New Hampshire for the weekend skiing, and when I came home, across my garage was the Brewster Turkey Farm. So I said, it was up for about 2 months, and I'm getting all phone calls from crazy people asking me stuff. And then finally my wife said, Dick, get Brian to get that out of there. So right now, if you go into the Woodshed and look up, you'll see the Brewster Turkey Farm. Yeah.
Well, I know at some point you and Judy lived at the Brewster Inn.
Oh yeah, well, well see, that's how I got to go school full-time. Because after we finally get married, that in '62, that fall, I went back to Bentley's full-time, and I got a part-time job at Mass General. I wasn't a doctor, no. It was a great job, though. I was a ward secretary, and I used to come in at like 4 o'clock. I worked like 4 to 8, and I worked in the children's area, and I'd have 2 or 3 kids in wheelchairs and everything wait for me to get off the thing. So, but so then, and Judy was teaching in Wakefield and in Malden, so we both had the summer off. And friends said, would you run the thing and establish a set of books? And that's what I did, and I ran that for a few seasons, and ended up selling it to Pete Murphy, who became a very good friend, who I just lost a couple of years ago. And Pete Murphy rented it recently.
Well, now, didn't you live in the inn?
Oh yes, yeah. Well, we had to live all summer.
But I mean, was there some point when you lived there a year?
One winter.
Yeah.
Yes, one winter. Right, that was it. And the Gibson family was there, yeah.
So what was it like living in that building in the winter?
That was quiet. I remember we went to, there was a caretaker, Wally, that was kind of adopted by her family. And we went to, I don't know, someone told us about it. We went down to the beach and we gathered seaweed. And we put it all around the foundations to keep the wind from blowing under. I remember that. But we did that in the spring. We were out of there, yeah.
And you had little children.
Well, one just had Terry then, and then back to then I went back over it's a long involved story, but I ended up working there, and then I was back to the Brewster, the Blue Rock,
Mm-hmm.
and from Blue Rock to the Red Jacket, where I was there forever, and I bought some land off of Stony Brook Road from my uncle, and the Davenports did a very nice job, gave me a real good deal building the house there, and I think we're still building it, I don't know. But that's how that came about. My uncle had bought the property, and he had passed away, and my aunt basically sold it. Yeah. And that's how we're here.
So did you get any time off? It sounds like you were working all day. And maybe...
you know what? In the summertime, I took a day, okay? And by the time I went to the dump and cut the grass, it was time to go back to work. And very often my day off was like a Tuesday. But as I get into it a little better, I sometimes got a Sunday afternoon off. But in the wintertime, I worked a normal 5-day week. I could get out of there, and I was able to get involved in the youth hockey programs in the Lower Cape because I could make the thing. I helped coach the kids. I'm happy to say I'm Still on the ice.
Sometimes on the ice.
Oh, yes, I got that down pat. Yeah, and that's kind of how that developed. We're lucky. We raised 3 kids down here, and 2 around the Cape. My youngest one's in Provincetown, and Amy's right down the road with 2 beautiful girls. When I'm going to one of the oldest ones, the 13, her basketball game this afternoon. And my son's up in North Conway with 2 boys who are 11, 9, playing hockey, and a 5-year-old granddaughter that's joined them.
Yeah.
Yes. Cordelia Keith was across the street. I remember that. And some of her guests would come over to the Woodshed or something, you know. And as I said, it was a piano. And if we got stuck and Judy's mother was around, she'd sit in and play the piano. I mean, there was a lot of good.
Did you know Cordelia Keith?
Well, I know her to say hello to, yes, and I knew a couple of her guests.
Mm-hmm.
But no, and there would I'll tell you, someone that helped me out that worked in town was Henry Callahan. Had his own insurance business.
Yeah.
And he was one of the guys who would come in like when I was just getting set up around 6 o'clock. I guess I know he liked the Manhattan. That did make him a bad person. And he's the one, along with another guy, that I said, you know, now that I'm going to finally graduate, I would like to, you know, consider the Cape. And I had a resume. And he said, why don't you go over to Yarmouth and tell him I sent you this guy, Pete Davenport.
Oh, that was nice.
And I said, well, I went over there and, you know, made an appointment, went and saw him, had a very nice talk with him, and that was like in August, and I never heard. I got a call in January. Why don't you come down? I got something you might be interested in. I always liked the punchline though. He said, I know you want to be in my accounting office, but I realized that you have some hospitality experience. He didn't spend a lot of time at the Woodshed. So I said, oh yeah. But he said, I have a, you know, brand new inn on the golf course. And he said, it's got a nice apartment, an automobile. I have a profit sharing program and a medical plan. I said, Judy. And we had no children then. I said, well, give it a try. And then from there, you know, the Red Jackets grew, the property's up north, and I still have great memories of it. I don't miss the fact I was just skating yesterday, and I saw this good-looking young lady out in the middle of the ice, and she's spinning and this and that. And I said, why do I think I know her? Mr. Galligan, she worked here years ago.
Oh, that's nice.
She's telling me she's a grandmother. How can you be a grandmother? But here's my wife, she kills me. My biggest brag is that there were 19 couples that met on my watch. You know, a bellman meets the girl on the front desk, and before you know it, they're dating in the summer, then they're dating the next summer, and before you know it, I'm going to a wedding. But that was a good part of it, and a lot of them keep in touch.
That's nice.
And that's how we got here.
Well, you have some nice memories of Cape Cod.
Oh, I have great memories.
I mean, when being young.
Who did I run into just last summer? And he said his mother was coming down. No, his sister was coming down because his mother passed away. Dave Lamprey, that lives right near the other side of the Brewster Inn. And I can always remember his mother down at Breakwater Beach. Maybe because my mother was a single parent. She always went out of her way to be nice to me and nice to her mother. Mm-hmm. And I met his sister down there. She was on the Cape for a while and dated a couple of guys. She was a lot older, not a lot older, but older. And he said, oh, my sister's coming down. And I said, oh, I want you to see her. We did that last year. And he's very fond of Judy's older brother, Jack.
Tell me about some of the other businesses you remember being on the Cape then.
Well, the gas station in East Brewster was always there. It was run by, I think, Bill Tubman at one time, Herb Montgomery at one time.
What about the gas station right here?
Oh, yes. Miss Chevet. Oh, my goodness, what a character. She was about this big, and that was her operation. And she was like a one-man show. And she used to have a milk carton to get up and wipe your windshield, you know, and she pumped the gas and made the change, and she called the shots. Another thing, and then right next door to that was the dispatch center. But on certain nights, or I don't know how it was scheduled, Max Sensabaugh would work the dispatch center. It took the calls for the fire department and the calls for the police department. And, you know, we'd stop in and say hello to him. And when I was looking at that book recently, there was Howard McLachlan was the chief of police.
He was the police.
He was it. Yeah, before, what's his name? Took out, I knew the name.
Sabin.
Sabin Lloyd, yeah. But when I was 16, I brought down a BB gun and rifle. And I wanted, but my aunt said, you don't really use that until you get, you can be, the Mr. Officer McGlashan, the Chief McGlashan said it's okay. I happened to bump into him up near the library and I was nervous as anything. What do you want to shoot? I said, in the backyard towards the woods. If you do that, it's all right. Tell you, Grant, I said so. So I was happy to do that one. And I said, I brought you an antique. And it's not my wife.
But does it have to do with Brewster?
Yes.
Oh.
It goes to one of your prime people in the town of Brewster. I've had it for a while. I was going through something. I have a fishing license dial that I took out in 1955, signed by A. Percy Newcomb.
No.
You want it?
Nice. Very nice.
Yeah. I said, I forgot all about that. Ran across that.
So
And,
the dispatcher.
yeah, a little thing though. So I mentioned Vi and Max Sensibar.
Yes.
Okay. They eventually took over Mary and Andy's, and it was Vi and Max.
Oh.
And they were in that for several years. Yeah. Yeah, and it was right, they lived almost diagonally across the street. Yeah, Vi and Max coffee shop.
So the dispenser that was in that little building there was for the police and the fire both?
Yes, oh yeah, yeah. It was like a little,
So there's one policeman.
well, yeah, yeah. You know, if you knew that, Nash was going to bed, you could do about anything else you want in town every night. I don't want, yeah. Place was wild. But, no, there were a good group of young people, and I know there's a Mrs. Atherton up at 137. She used to have us, she had a couple of daughters, Sonny and I, and we'd go, what do you do when you're 15?
That's what I'm
You shoot the
wondering.
breeze around the house, and about 9:30 you go home, And oh yes, and Judy's sister, I forgot that. We call Aunt Fran. They have what they call a telephone room. Okay, now it's part of the dining room. But there was a payphone on the phone, and people wanted to go in there. And she brought a record player, and we would go down there at 7:30 at night and play records and tell stories and crazy games and pick up sticks, and about 9:30 you go home. I mean, you got to do something. Sit around the house. And I know my wonderful cousin Jim Coogan, when I would go down the street, he'd wait till I get about beyond, and he had a dog named Tippy, and he'd say, "Go get him." So then Tippy would be at the Lund's house, and I have to take Tippy home, shoot, and beat up my cousin. But no, yeah, we met a lot of nights, and right next door to us, what was in that? There's the Dunnells family next to that house in between, I guess. And he had a print shop out back. I used to go and drive him crazy. He had a little print shop. And he had two older sons and a gal, another daughter named Sally. She was about a year or so younger. I don't know whatever happened to the whole gang.
Was that Wynn Dunnells?
Wynn Dunnells,
Yeah.
yes. Very good, yeah. How'd you come up with that one? Yeah, Wynn Dunnells.
Did you know the Lunds? Did you know Ollie Lund?
I know who they,
But you didn't
no,
really know him.
No, yeah. I can remember we sat on Katie Gibbs's fence once, and we broke that.
And tell us where Katie Gibbs lived.
Oh, Katie, right down on Lower Road.
Yeah.
Right in a beautiful house on the corner, halfway down to the
That's
right.
the Elijah Comp House, right?
Oh, yes, but that's right, yeah, but, oh, yeah. Her father, they owned a lot of property. And if you walk through the back, we didn't go that way, we went by the beach, by Breakwater. You walk down, up the hill. He had a shack up there that he did his artwork in.
That's right.
That's a great place to hang around, we found that out.
Yeah.
Katie and Phyllis and Jackie and Sonny, and we get down and to do the same thing, to tell stories, I don't think there was any romances that I remember, but I can remember doing that. But in fact, many times I've tried to find out where that was, but I'm sure there's a monster house on top of it.
Well, it's all that Cobb's Pond. It's all that Cobb's Pond condominiums now.
Well, yeah, it was, if you went beyond the pond and went way up, that's, yeah. And there were two brothers that were dentists I know that lived on that Concord Road, and they used to come down to Woodshed and kid me about a lot of things.
There was a path from the Gibbs house right through the woods out to that shack.
Yes,
You could walk
yes.
right down the path to get there.
But see, we had to go through a yard to get to the...
Oh, I see. We didn't
yes,
want to do that.
You better go the other way.
Yeah.
Got half a brain. In fact, my brother-in-law rented that house a couple of years ago.
Oh, no.
I noticed it just changed hands again.
Yeah.
And so I got to look around the whole place, and yeah, it was good. Yeah, I never got any further than the broken fence. Yeah.
So the fire department was all on call, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, yeah. They just had like one engine or something. Most of the time, you'd see them my cousin Jimmy, he'd run was fires at the dump.
Right.
Yeah, there was a lot of dump fires, I can remember that. But I don't remember anyone who might have worked there. I'm trying to think who I met. Yeah.
And ever use your BB gun at the dump?
No,
You were a good
I
kid.
did my thing, keep it in the backyard, yeah. Well, that's all I wanted to do was shoot at tin cans or something. I wasn't shooting people at the street, yeah. And at home, I remember we had it down, we had a cellar, and a couple of big guys upstairs had them, and they had something set up I could shoot down there. Yeah. Yes.
This has been fun.
I think the best thing is I can't believe that you saw the neighborhood and everything, the house that we ended up with, and the good life that we both had, and I raised the 3 great kids, and I don't seem to get to church much, but I seem to sit on that front porch and thank God for all the good luck I had.
Yeah.
Must have been my mother.
I think she had a lot to do
Well,
with
she
it.
retired, and she had a little cottage down off of Paynes Creek. I rented half of it, and who did I just rent? Someone used to take her to mass 7 days a week, and Ruth Hamlin.
Oh.
Yes, I can remember Ruth. Do you know Ruth Hamlin? She's a character, good lady, and she lived this end of. In fact, they'd done a whole lot of work almost across the street from where Katie Gibbs is. That house is being well. That she lived with her husband, and they used to come in with 2 other couples to the Woodshed, and they'd sing the songs and have a couple of drinks, and Judy was waiting at the table, and we've known them for quite a while, and she went over one night, and it was busy, and she had 6 drinks on her thing, and she dumped them on Mr. Hamlin. And he got up. He was very nice about it. He got up, took his shirt off, his belly's hanging out, wrung the whole shirt out, put the shirt down. I sent over another round of drinks. So I stopped by to see her just before Christmas. And I hadn't seen her in quite a while. Oh my God, she had tears. We had a good time. She's at Brewster Manor.
Yeah.
So we had that story.
That's lovely.
Yep.
This is so nice. I'm so glad you came in to talk with us. This has been fun.
I'm glad you asked me. I can't believe I ran into my cousin.
That was funny.
Who's another author that grew up in the Joseph C. Lincoln home.
That's right.
Oh yeah. Must be something in the woodwork. I don't know.
They say Joe Lincoln used to go down to the store and be up on the 2nd floor as a kid and listen to all the men talking downstairs around the stove. And that's where he got a lot of the, if not the stories, at least the manner of speaking. So Jim kind of carried on the tradition, going down there and reading everything in the store.
Well, just as when I was single down, Ron Thibodeau was my best man and my childhood friend. We did everything together, from playing hockey to, going to service and everything else. But we used to come down weekends, and gosh, we had some great times down here. And I'll leave you one more. I can always remember when I got home, a good time. We had to go back the next morning to work in Cambridge. And he got home very late one night, and because my mother would get breakfast for us because we were leaving at like 6 a.m. or something. And she says, "Ron, I was very worried about you. Did you get lost last night?" He said, "Yes, in her arms." My mother always liked that.